The explosion didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like the earth giving up. One moment the valley was breathing, wind over dry grass, boots crunching on shale, and the next it was fire, noise, and screaming metal. When the dust finally settled, she was the only one still moving. Her name was Lieutenant Mara Hale, and she had no time to grieve the men who had fallen beside her. She crawled because standing meant dying. She crawled because her radio was shattered, her rifle was gone, and the enemy fire was walking closer, step by deliberate step. She crawled because somewhere down the slope, 2 platoons of her battalion were pinned in a bowl of stone with no air support, no artillery, and no idea that their forward scout team had just been erased from the map. Mara had been the quiet one. The one people trusted without quite noticing. She didn't talk much in briefings. She didn't boast at the range. She was the officer who checked gear twice, who wrote letters home for soldiers who couldn't find the words, who volunteered for the job no one else wanted because it needed to be done. When the ambush hit, she had been walking point, eyes scanning, mind calm. When it ended, she was alone. She slid into a ravine and stayed there until nightfall, counting her breaths, pressing a shaking hand against the blood soaking her sleeve. The wound was bad but not fatal. She wrapped it, bit down on a strip of cloth, and waited for the dark to give her back the smallest chance to move. In the distance, she could hear the battle continuing, short bursts of gunfire, the hollow thump of mortars. Her soldiers were still alive. Barely. She moved through the night like a ghost that didn't believe in itself. No rifle meant no fight, so she avoided everything. When dawn came, it found her high on a ridgeline, exhausted, dehydrated, and staring down at the valley where the rest of her unit was trapped. She raised her binoculars with trembling hands and felt something inside her break and harden at the same time. They were surrounded. Enemy forces had taken the high ground, dug in with heavy machine guns and long-range optics. Any attempt to move was punished instantly. A medevac bird lay burning at the edge of the landing zone, its twisted rotor blades pointing accusingly at the sky. The radio silence told her what she already knew: command was too far, assets too tied up. Help was not coming in time. Mara checked her pack again, knowing what she would find. A sidearm with limited range. A single smoke grenade. Binoculars. And then, by some cruel mercy, a long rifle she had scavenged hours earlier from a fallen enemy sniper, wrapped carefully in oilcloth. She had almost left it behind. Almost. She lay prone and studied the terrain the way she had been trained, the way she had practiced on wind-swept ranges where instructors told her to forget her doubts or let them kill her. The enemy commander had positioned himself smartly, far, elevated, shielded by rock. He was directing fire, shifting teams, controlling the valley like a chessboard. If he fell, the net might loosen. If he didn't, everyone down there would die. Mara checked the rifle's markings and felt her stomach drop. The distance between her and the enemy position stretched far beyond anything she had ever attempted. 2,900 meters. Almost 3 kilometers. The bullet drop alone would be monstrous. The wind between them wasn't one wind but dozens, rolling through the valley in invisible rivers. The scope was good, but not miraculous. The rifle was accurate, but not forgiving. The shot was impossible. She lowered the rifle and closed her eyes. Faces came unbidden. Sergeant Cole, who always complained but never failed. Private Ramirez, who had asked her the night before if courage was something you learned or something you pretended until it became real. She thought of the letters she had promised to help write, the jokes she hadn't laughed at, the way they had trusted her to lead them forward and back. She was the only one who had escaped. That truth sat on her chest like a weight. Survival felt less like a gift and more like an accusation. Mara exhaled slowly and began to prepare. She watched the wind for nearly an hour, studying dust, grass, the faint shimmer of heat. She calculated and recalculated, scribbling notes in the dirt with a knife. She adjusted the scope far past what felt reasonable, compensating for drop that would take the bullet on a long, arcing journey. She knew that if she missed, the enemy would relocate instantly. There would be no second chance. Down in the valley, a machine gun opened up again, stitching fire across a cluster of rocks where her soldiers were sheltering. She saw one of them fall, dragged back by 2 others. The clock was no longer theoretical. Mara settled behind the rifle and felt the calm arrive, not the absence of fear, but the presence of purpose. She thought of her instructors, of the mantra drilled into her bones: fundamentals don't care about distance. Breath, trigger, follow through, let the math do its work. She squeezed. The rifle bucked gently, almost apologetically. The sound of the shot vanished into the open air, swallowed by space and time. The bullet began its long flight, arcing higher than anyone watching would have believed, crossing layers of wind that pushed and pulled at it like hands arguing over its fate. Mara held her breath. Seconds passed, too many seconds. Then, through the scope, she saw it, the smallest movement, a figure on the far ridge jerking backward, collapsing out of view. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. And then the enemy line wavered. Orders went unanswered. Fire became ragged, uncertain. In the valley, her soldiers felt it before they understood it. The pressure eased. The angles of fire shifted. Confusion rippled through the opposing force like a crack in ice. A squad seized the moment and moved. Another followed. Smoke bloomed. Radios crackled back to life. Mara didn't celebrate. She cycled the bolt and stayed on the scope, ready to take another shot if she had to, even though she knew she wouldn't get the same alignment twice. She watched as her unit fought its way free, using the opening she had torn in the impossible. When the extraction finally came hours later, the helicopters landed under covering fire, battered but intact. Soldiers stumbled aboard, carrying wounded, helping each other, alive. From her ridge, Mara slumped back against the rock and let the exhaustion claim her at last. They found her near dusk, a rescue team guided by the faint signal of her emergency beacon. She was barely conscious when they lifted her, the rifle still clutched in her hands like proof she hadn't dreamed at all. Back at base, the story spread the way such stories always do, quietly at first, then with awe. Analysts checked the data again and again. The distance was confirmed, the conditions logged. Instructors shook their heads, some smiled, a few whispered that it shouldn't have been possible. When Mara finally stood before her unit weeks later, arms still in a sling, the room went silent. She looked at them, at the faces that had haunted her since the ambush, and felt something loosen inside her chest. "I didn't save you alone," she said, voice steady despite everything. "You held on. You trusted your training. You trusted each other. All I did was refuse to stop trying." Afterward, when the applause faded and the room emptied, Sergeant Cole lingered. "You know," he said softly, "they're going to talk about that shot for years." Mara nodded. "They shouldn't," she replied. "They should talk about what happens when no one gives up, even when the odds say you should." The impossible shot became a legend, but the real lesson lived quieter than that. It lived in the knowledge that survival carries responsibility, that courage often looks like patience under unbearable pressure, and that sometimes the distance between defeat and hope is measured not in meters, but in the choice to take one last breath and believe your actions still matter. Because on a broken ridge, far from help, one soldier chose to try, and every other soldier came home because of it.